When I lost my dad, I thought my family would hold me up. Instead, they used my grief to steal everything he left behind. My name's Daniel Foster. I'm 24 now, but when this all started, I was 22, fresh out of college and barely holding it together. My dad was my anchor. He raised me alone after my mom left when I was 5. We didn't have much, but he made sure I had everything I needed: stability, values, and most of all, love. He worked as an auto mechanic for nearly 30 years, built up a small shop of his own, and despite the oil stains on his hands and the tiredness in his eyes, he never once complained. He just kept building. For me. When he passed away suddenly from a heart attack, I thought the world had stopped turning. I was numb, shattered, and completely unprepared for what came next. The funeral was a blur. I remember standing by his casket while distant relatives I hadn't seen in years came by, offering empty condolences. But the people I counted on most, my Uncle Roy, Dad's older brother, and my 2 cousins, seemed distant, off, like they knew something I didn't. Turns out they did. 2 weeks after the funeral, I went to check on Dad's shop. The door was padlocked. A for lease sign hung crooked in the window. Confused, I called Roy. That's when the truth started to unravel. Roy calmly told me the business had been sold to cover debts, he said. I asked about the house, the savings account I knew Dad kept, even the old pickup truck that had sat in our driveway since I was 10. Gone, all of it. Sold, liquidated, transferred. I was stunned. But Dad told me everything would go to me. He said he wrote a will. Roy sighed. He did, but he never updated it after your 18th birthday. Legally, I was next of kin. I handled the paperwork. And just like that, 22 years of my father's legacy, everything he worked for, every tool in that shop, and every saved penny was gone, sold off by the very man who gave the eulogy. I remember hanging up the phone and just sitting there. My hands were shaking, my throat dry. That night I slept in my car. The house I grew up in had already been cleared out. For a while, I didn't know what to do. I couch surfed with friends, took temp jobs, grieved silently. I didn't have the money for lawyers, and Roy made sure I couldn't afford one if I tried. He'd covered his tracks well. But my father didn't raise a quitter. One night I remembered something Dad always said. People can take what they want from you, but they can't take who you are unless you hand it to them. So I started digging. I worked evenings at a delivery job and spent nights teaching myself estate law, public records, and property databases. I tracked down everything I could find connected to Roy: transactions, title changes, business filings. And then I found it. A handwritten letter in a lockbox buried deep in my dad's storage unit, one he'd rented secretly after my mom left. In it, my father wrote about Roy, how he never trusted him, how he worried Roy might try to take advantage if anything ever happened. The letter ended with one line. If anything ever feels off, check the shop's safe. It's yours. I hadn't thought about the shop safe. It was hidden behind a shelf in the back, built into the concrete floor. I broke in at midnight, flashlight in hand, and inside, a notarized will, dated just 6 months before his death, leaving everything to me. Everything. The shop, the house, the accounts, even the life insurance policy Roy claimed didn't exist. The signature was clean, the notary real. I nearly dropped to my knees. I took it straight to a lawyer the next morning. Within weeks, the lawsuit was filed. Roy panicked. His lawyer tried to stall, delay, bury me in legal jargon, but the evidence was clear: fraud, forgery. He'd filed the old will, suppressing the new one. Even the debts he claimed existed: fake invoices, shell companies. He'd gutted my dad's estate to fund his own floundering construction business. It went public. And suddenly, the same relatives who ignored me at the funeral were calling, apologizing, pretending they had no idea. I didn't answer. 6 months later, I stood in front of that same auto shop, this time with the keys in my hand. The judge had returned everything, Roy was fined, his business was shuttered, his reputation ruined. I reopened Foster Auto not just as a repair shop, but as a tribute. Photos of my dad line the back wall. His old workbench is still there, with his tools exactly where he left them. I added a coffee corner and a small scholarship in his name for kids like me who just need a little guidance. Sometimes people come in and ask why a 24-year-old runs a shop alone. I just smile and say, because my father never really left. He just passed me the torch. And Roy? Last I heard, he was working for someone else, minimum wage. Word is he can't find clients who trust him. Funny how karma works. It doesn't always come fast. But when it shows up, it brings receipts. I didn't expect him to show up at the shop. But he did. It was a Tuesday late morning, right after I'd finished up an oil change for an elderly regular. I looked up from under the hood, and there he was, Roy, standing across the lot like he wasn't sure if he had the right place. He looked older, smaller, like the weight of his own actions had finally started dragging him down. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes sunken, and for the first time in my life, he looked like a man who'd lost everything. I didn't say anything. I just wiped my hands on a rag and leaned against the hood. He stepped forward slowly. "I heard you reopened," he said, voice low. "Didn't think you'd want to see me." I shrugged. I didn't. He nodded, lips tight. I made mistakes." That almost made me laugh. "Mistakes," I repeated. "You forged a legal document, liquidated my father's life's work, left me homeless, and tried to erase me from his legacy. That's not a mistake. That's a campaign." His eyes dropped. "You're right." There was a pause. Just the wind between us and the occasional sound of traffic in the distance. "I lost the house," he said quietly. "My business folded. I owe more than I'll ever repay. My kids don't speak to me. My wife, she left last month." I stayed silent, not because I didn't feel anything, but because I felt too much. Rage, sadness, justice, and maybe, somewhere deep inside, a sliver of pity. But not enough to forget. "Why are you here, Roy?" I asked finally. He hesitated, swallowed. "I need work." That hit like a punch. "I'm not asking for favors," he added quickly. "I'll sweep floors, clean up, anything. I just need something." This was the man who told me I didn't matter, who looked me in the eyes and said, "It's just business, kid," when I begged him to stop, who laughed when I told him I'd fight back. And now he was standing in front of me, hands empty, pride shattered, asking for mercy. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I stepped aside, walked to the workbench behind me, and picked up an old rusted wrench, my dad's favorite. I held it out to him. "You see this?" I asked. He nodded. "This wrench has fixed more cars than you've stolen dollars. It's worn, scarred, and still reliable, just like my dad, just like this shop. But you used to have your own tools, Roy, your own life, and you threw it all away for greed." I set the wrench down with a heavy clunk. I don't need another janitor. I need integrity, loyalty, the kind of man my dad was. That's the bar. And you're not even close. His shoulders slumped. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult him. I just stepped back toward the shop door and said, "Bio, you're not welcome here, and you never will be." And I turned my back. He stood there for a few seconds. Then I heard his footsteps retreat down the gravel. No words, no fight left. Later that night, I sat at Dad's workbench, lights dimmed, flipping through one of his old notebooks. Inside were sketches, designs for a new kind of engine stabilizer he'd been toying with. He never got the chance to patent it. But now I would. I smiled, because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about building something better from the ashes, taking pain and turning it into purpose, creating a legacy not in my father's shadow, but in his honor. And as I closed the notebook, I thought, you can lose everything, but if you still have your name, your grit, and your sense of right, you're never truly beaten. This is my story, and it's just getting started. But her father had poisoned that possibility, or so I thought. I opened the door slowly. She looked different now, older of course, but softer, worn around the edges like someone who'd seen too much too young. I heard what happened, she said, with Roy. I nodded. Word travels fast. She stepped in, hesitant. Her eyes wandered around the shop like she was walking through an old photo. He was never the same after your dad passed, she said quietly. I think maybe he saw a chance to take control for once, and he took it the only way he knew how. I didn't answer. Doesn't make it right, she added quickly. What he did was unforgivable, but I thought you should know. He talks about you. He says he wishes he'd handled everything differently. I bet he does, I replied. There was a pause. Then she looked at me with that same intensity she had when we were kids. You didn't deserve what happened, and I'm sorry I stayed away. I didn't know what to say. You didn't have to say anything, I said. He made his choices. You didn't owe me anything. I think I did, she said, voice cracking, because I loved this place too, and I loved your dad like he was mine. That caught me off guard. She walked up to the bench, ran her hand over the worn edge, smiled softly. You're rebuilding it, just like he would have. Yeah, I said, and maybe something more. She looked at me then, not with pity, not with nostalgia, but with something else, something hopeful. I teach accounting now, she said, boring, I know. But if you ever want help with books, taxes, you name it. I smiled. I might take you up on that. We stood there for a moment. Two kids who'd grown up, who'd lost a lot, who somehow were still here. And then she said something I didn't expect. Your dad would be proud, Daniel. That hit me harder than anything Roy ever could have done. After she left, I sat back down at the workbench and pulled out my dad's notebook again. I flipped to the last page where he'd scrawled a sentence, probably without thinking, maybe years ago. It read, "The real legacy isn't what you build, it's who you become after it all falls apart." I closed the book, took a deep breath. And for the first time in years, I felt light. Because this wasn't just a story about loss, or revenge, or karma. It was about rebuilding. About earning your name back, not just in the eyes of the world, but in the eyes of the person staring back at you in the mirror. And I had done that. This was my shop now. My name on the sign. My future in my hands. And I was finally ready to live it. A week later, I officially reopened the garage under a new name, Mason's Son Honest Auto. I wanted people to remember my dad, sure, but I also wanted them to know there was a new chapter now, one that stood on its own. The first few months were quiet. I fixed a few trucks, changed some brake pads, took on basic jobs to keep the lights on. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't instant success. But it was honest, it was mine. Elena started stopping by once a week, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with her laptop and receipts I forgot to log. We talked more, laughed more. The walls between us, ones we didn't even know we'd built, started coming down. One Saturday afternoon, she found an old Polaroid tucked in the drawer of the front desk. It was me and her, age 9, both covered in grease, grinning like idiots. Behind us stood my dad, pretending to be angry but clearly proud. We both just stared at it for a moment. You think he knew? She asked. Knew what? That we'd end up back here, like this. I smiled. He always said some things are written in the oil. She laughed. That's gross. That's my dad. A few customers trickled in that day, mostly neighbors and old friends, but one of them stood out. A man in his late 40s, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up. He looked at the sign above the garage, then at me. Slowly walked over. You Mason's kid? I am. He nodded. Your dad rebuilt my transmission in 03, didn't charge me a dime, said I looked like I was having a rough month. I remembered that month. My dad came home quiet every night, never told me why. I've needed a mechanic who gives a damn since, the man said. Think you're up for it? I don't work for free, I said, smiling. He smiled back. Good. That means you're smart too. That day marked something I couldn't quite explain. A shift, a turning point. Not just for business, but for healing. For reclaiming everything I thought I'd lost. By the end of that year, I had 2 part-time mechanics helping me. Elena had taken over as a bookkeeper and unofficial co-owner, and I had lines of customers who weren't just coming for oil changes, they were coming for the name, for the story, for something that felt real. And late one evening, as I locked up, I caught myself staring at the stars just like my dad used to. I whispered, "We're okay, old man. We're okay." Then I got in my truck and drove home. Because for the first time in years, I finally had a home again. And nothing, no betrayal, no loss, no old ghost could take that from me. Ever again. I didn't expect the garage to turn into a kind of second home for others, too. Elena started bringing lunch more regularly. Sometimes she'd stay for hours, working from the old folding table in the corner with her laptop open, sipping coffee from a cracked mug my dad had kept for years. She'd start doing small things without being asked, rearranging the front office, managing bookings, making quiet suggestions I didn't even realize I needed. One Thursday afternoon, she handed me a notepad filled with scribbles and sticky notes. What's this? Just ideas, ways to update the space, maybe even create a website. There's potential here, Mason, more than you see. I looked at her. You think this can grow? She smiled, her eyes soft but steady. I think you can. I didn't say anything for a moment, just nodded. But her words stuck with me. Later that night, as I closed up shop, I sat alone in the back office. The only sound was the old wall clock ticking above my dad's photo. I thought about everything, the betrayal, the lonely months, the weight of grief I didn't know how to carry. And now the slow rebuilding, one kind gesture at a time, one greasy wrench turn after another. It was happening. I was starting to breathe again. One evening, out of nowhere, Matt showed up. Yeah, that Matt. The guy who married my cousin. The guy who took my job and spun it like it was his own. He walked into the garage with that same smug face I remembered only now. It was tired, sunken. The light in his eyes dimmed. I heard you were back, he said, voice low. I didn't offer him a seat. He glanced around, eyes resting on the clean floors, the neatly organized tools, the family photos taped to the bulletin board. This place looks different, he muttered. Everything does when you're not screwing it over, I said. He swallowed hard. Listen, I came because... He paused, looking down. I need work. Things didn't pan out the way I thought. Of course they didn't. The company he helped sabotage went under 6 months after I left. My uncle blamed the economy, but I knew the truth. There's only so far you can get with ambition and no soul. Matt shifted awkwardly. I thought maybe, if you needed a second pair of hands... I laughed, actually laughed. I built this place from rock bottom, Matt. With my hands and heart and every ounce of pain you helped cause, I don't owe you a damn thing. He didn't argue. He just nodded, eyes glassy, and walked out. And as the door clicked shut behind him, I realized something. I didn't feel vindictive, or cruel, or angry. I felt whole. I didn't need to destroy him. Life had done that. His choices had done that. He had done that. And I had chosen better. Weeks turned into months. The garage kept growing. Local papers ran a story about the family-run shop rebuilt on legacy and grit. We got a new lift installed, hired a second apprentice. People started driving in from out of town just to get their car fixed by the guy who started from nothing. But it wasn't just me anymore. One night, I walked in after hours and found Elena asleep at the front desk, head on a pile of invoices, her glasses still on. I covered her with my jacket and sat quietly across from her, just watching her breathe. And for the first time in years, I let myself imagine a future that wasn't built on pain, one built on patience, love, rebuilding, not revenge. I whispered more to myself than to her, "We're gonna be okay." She stirred slightly. "What?" "Nothing," I smiled. "Go back to sleep." Outside, the neon sign buzzed softly against the dark sky. Mason Son Honest Auto. But now it meant more than ever before. Because honesty isn't just how you fix a car, it's how you fix a life. And this life mine finally felt like it was just getting started. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. A letter came in the mail, no return address, just my name written in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. It was from my cousin, Lily. The same Lily who'd gone silent after everything fell apart, the one who'd watched her husband, Matt, burn bridges and never once spoke up. I had buried any hope of hearing from her. But inside the envelope was a folded sheet of paper and a photo. The photo was old, taken at the garage when we were kids. I was maybe 12, grinning proudly next to my dad, oil smudged on my cheek. Lily stood beside me, holding a spark plug like it was a trophy. Back when life was simple, honest. The note was short. "I should have stood by you. I was scared, and then it was too late. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I remember who you are. I hope you found peace." Tutti. I held the paper for a long time, staring at our younger faces. No, I didn't hate her. I never really had. But I needed to lose everything to learn what truly mattered. And now I had something even betrayal couldn't touch: purpose, people, and peace. That weekend, we held a small reopening barbecue outside the shop. Just friends, locals. Elena made that homemade lemonade she always swore was nothing special, but somehow everyone refilled their cup twice. The apprentice Jake, a good kid, brought his dad. I grilled too long in the sun and got oil on my jeans. It was messy, warm, real. At one point, Elena sat next to me and nudged my arm. "Looks like a real family business now, doesn't it?" I looked around, laughter, chatter, the sun dipping below the trees. "It does," I said, "better than I ever imagined." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "So what now, Mason?" I took a breath. "Now? We keep going. We build slow, strong with the right people." And deep down, I knew one thing for sure. Sometimes karma looks like a storm. Other times, it looks like a second chance. And in my case, it looked like this garage, this woman beside me, and a quiet kind of happiness I didn't even know I deserved. The kind that stays. The kind that's earned. The kind that no one can take away again. 2 weeks after the barbecue, a black SUV pulled up across the street from the garage. I noticed it because it didn't fit. Everything about it was too clean, too polished, too corporate. A man stepped out in a navy suit, thin, sharp jaw, sunglasses that didn't come off, even in the shade. He stood for a moment like he was measuring the place, measuring me. I was under the hood of a '68 Mustang, so I wiped my hands and stepped out, keeping my stance calm. "Can I help you?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're Mason Rowe, right?" I nodded. He took off the sunglasses finally, cold, precise gaze. "My name's Carter Blake. I represent HB Auto Holdings." I didn't flinch, but inside my chest tightened. HB was the same firm that absorbed Matt's old company, the one he tried to run into the ground, the same one that sued me into the dust 2 years ago before I clawed my way out. Carter reached into his jacket and handed me a folder. "We're expanding into local acquisitions. Your name's come up more than once. Strong client loyalty, positive margins, community trust. We'd like to make you an offer." I opened the folder. It was a buyout proposal, 7 figures. 7. He mistook my silence for interest. "We believe your operation has regional potential. With our backing, this could be more than just a local garage. You could franchise, go statewide, maybe national." I stared at him for a long second. "You said HB, right?" I asked quietly. That's right. I closed the folder and handed it back. Tell your people I'm not for sale. His smile vanished. This isn't emotional, Mr. Rowe. It's business. You can walk away wealthy today, or you can wait until we open 3 blocks down with lower prices and better margins. You'll lose every customer you have. I tilted my head slightly. You don't understand the people who come here. They're not just buying repairs. They're buying trust. They're buying me. He smirked. That kind of loyalty doesn't last. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I just looked at him. Maybe not in your world. He stared at me for another moment, then got back in the SUV and drove off. I stood there long after the dust had settled. Because here's the thing about karma. Sometimes it doesn't just come for the people who wronged you. Sometimes it hands you the choice to become like them, or prove why you never will. And I knew one thing. I didn't rebuild my life just to sell it to the same machine that crushed me. This shop, these people, they were my answer to every lie I'd been told about success. That night, Elena found me sitting on the porch, deep in thought. She sat beside me and handed me a cup of coffee. Everything okay? I nodded slowly. They tried to buy me out today, 7 figures. Her eyebrows lifted. Wow, tempted? I looked over at the shop, lights off, still warm from the day's work. Not for a second. She smiled. Good, you already have everything money can't buy. And in that moment, I realized something. Revenge doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes in the form of peace they'll never understand. And sometimes the loudest victory is choosing not to become the villain in your own story. Sometimes revenge doesn't roar, it whispers, then leaves them in silence. Months passed. Business was steady again, not flashy but solid, the kind of rhythm that lets you sleep at night. I'd see people pull up to the shop, linger at the sidewalk, glance across the street where Blake Auto Care used to be. The building now sat hollow windows dark, letters peeling from the signage like flakes of regret. They'd look back at my garage. Then they'd step in. It was subtle at first, just an extra car or 2 per day. Then a family from 2 towns over, someone had told them I didn't just fix cars but helped rebuild people. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I was grateful. One evening, just before locking up, I got a message request on my phone. It was from Matt. I hadn't heard from him in 3 years. The message was short. Carter was never the partner I thought he'd be. He's suing me. I lost everything. I heard about what you did. You always were the better man. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned off my phone. Not out of hatred, but because some endings don't need a reply. Forgiveness isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's walking away from the wreckage without setting it on fire. That night I sat with Elena on the porch. We drank coffee in silence as the wind rustled the old oak tree in the yard. You okay? She asked. I nodded. I'm more than okay. I'm free. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You didn't get even. You got better. And that was the truth. Because in the end, I didn't need to ruin them. They did that themselves. I just had to stand tall, stay kind, and let time do what it always does best, reveal who people really are. And me, I just kept showing up, wrench in hand, heart still intact. My name is Mason. I'm 45 years old. I was betrayed, buried, and underestimated. But I came back. And I didn't just rebuild a garage. I rebuilt a life. One bolt, one truth, one second chance at a time.